It's a story that my wife and I tell from time to time. Kind of highlights, I guess, some of our weaknesses, I guess you would say, maybe some of our lesser attractive qualities. It happened about 18 years ago when we were dating. We were attending Florida Christian College at the time. And, there's a picture of what we used to look like. That was about the time, that picture was taken about the time we were dating. And our friends wanted to set us up as a couple. And we thought, we'll show them. They'll just be friends. And that lasted for a month or two. And then it blossomed into a romance. That's the advice that I give my kids, my boys, if you can be a friend with a woman, if you can be a friend with a girl, that's a skill that you will take with you for a lifetime and set up a foundation of a good romance, a good relationship. So here we are, around that time in our lives. I remember there's one time, this story happened 18 years ago when we were at a Walmart, actually. We were there with my wife's roommate, getting some groceries and some necessities that we're going to take back to our respective apartments at Florida Christian College, which is now Johnson University. And so we picked up those necessities. Being college students, I think the basket contained ramen noodles, for sure, some milk, some pine salt, more ramen noodles, toilet paper, and that was about it. And as we came out of the parking lot, my wife was pushing the cart, my future wife was pushing the cart, and I thought, this is an opportunity for me to show off some of my athleticism and maybe my adventure, sense of adventure and spontaneity and perhaps some chivalry. And so I pushed her off of the cart. And I began to do the thing that I had always done growing up. My parents told me not to do, to ride the cart down the aisle and down a slight decline. What I didn't notice, though, was that there was a grate in that aisle, a drainage grate. And now you have to understand, I went to Bible college, and so they didn't teach us physics, they taught us Hebrew. But I assume everything that I learned about physics, I learned from cartoons, from Wile E. Coyote. And I assume that if you're going fast enough over that grate, I feel like I've had this experience before, if you go fast enough over that grate, you'll just glide right across. What I didn't recognize was that the slats in that grate, the openings in that grate went long ways, the same direction as the wheels, and were wider than the wheels. So when I hit the grate, immediately the cart stood up, and I was on top of the cart for what felt like 3-4 minutes. Was actually probably in reality 1 second, and I continued. Velocity and gravity continued their force, making my trajectory something like that. And I landed on my back, milk and pine salt gushing into the drain, cart on top of me. There were people walking up the aisle, and they didn't respond at all. Didn't offer to help. My wife responded. What else would you expect? My wife and her roommate did respond, thus revealing one of her lesser attractive qualities, and that she likes to laugh at people who hurt themselves, and that she did. If there were any concern in her voice, I could not hear it through the laughter. And that story kind of highlights some of our tendencies that I believe God is helping us to let go of as He conforms us to His image. In fact, I would say that all of us have these tendencies, these weaknesses that God is inviting us to come out of and to embrace what He says is true about our identity as people who belong to Him. So here's the thing that I love about God. Here is the beauty of the gospel, that He knows our weakness and He invites us to be a part of His plan anyway. He knows our shortcomings, He knows our tendencies, and He invites us to be a part of what He is doing in the world, and in that process begins to conform us to the image of His Son in whom we have faith. 2 weeks ago, as I said, our kindergartners and fifth graders in the marina started this series they're calling Amped. We're calling it Live Like It's True. It's all the same stories, all the same ideas, and they are being invited to live out what we've been calling biblical confidence, which we described in this way last week. We said that biblical confidence is living like we believe what God says is true. We live our lives in such a way that it says if we believe what God says is true and we take action based on what God says is true, that's really what belief is. We trust what God says to the degree that we're willing to act in a way that is in line with that truth. And when we do that, we live these lives of confidence. And we've said that kind of confidence is a biblical version of confidence, and it's a opposed and different from what the Bible would call a worldly version of confidence or self-confidence, in that we believe that if because we are good, we can accomplish great things. Biblical confidence is different than that. Biblical confidence is the idea that because God is good and He's at work in our lives, we can accomplish good things. And so this morning we're continuing that theme. Last week we saw in the story of Gideon that as he began to trust God, what God says is true, that he did something amazing. And you'll see that again this week. But I would say that this story, the story of Samson, actually highlights that second idea much more. That idea of self-confidence, of worldly confidence. And it's something that God is inviting us out of. This is a story, I would say, it's a really good story as far as stories go. But even more than that, it's a story in which Samson fails to recognize his own limits. A story in which he displays a lack of empathy for others, and more than anything, a story in which he trades biblical confidence for self-confidence. Here's the good news. Here's the gospel. The good news of boundless grace that comes through faith in Jesus. That when we learn to let go of those things that we consider our strengths and that others consider our strengths, when we learn to find our identity not in those things and even not in our own weaknesses or shortcomings, we begin to embrace and live out this biblical idea of confidence. And our desire as a church is for not only for our children to live that out, but for us as adults, for us as a family, to show them what that looks like, to live it out together. What would it mean to be a church that is confident in the way that we live out our faith? A church that is fueled by peace and joy and the hope of the gospel, where we don't live like we have something to prove, rather we live out something that is true. And that's what we see, at least in a morality tale in the life of Samson, a call, at the end of his life, we see a call to embrace humility and live out what God desires to do in our own life. Well, let's back up just a little bit in this story. I think here's really the big idea that we're going to see. If you don't hear anything else today, hear this. That God is stronger than our weakness. If you look at the story of Samson, on the surface, you think of the story about a guy's strength. He's a man who possesses biblical strength. Strength in biblical proportions. He's a strong man. But really, this is a story about Samson's weaknesses. And how God is at work in his life in spite of those weaknesses. All of us have those weaknesses. All of us have blind spots. And if you think that you don't have weaknesses, if you think you don't have blind spots, that's your weakness. In fact, Samson kind of lives that example out for us. We are being invited to live out what God says is true. To let go of the ways that we cope with our shortcomings. To let go of behavior that not only hurts others, but betrays our true identity in Christ. So here's what we see in the story. God can use overconfident people. God can use people who underestimate their limitations. He not only wants to redeem and offer grace to people who have a past that they want to forget, He also works through people who have a tendency towards drama. He is at work for people who have been physically and sexually abused and perpetuate that same cycle. God works through people who tend to like to escape through their work and through addictions and through entertainment and drugs and alcohol. And He uses people who are judgmental and self-righteous. He uses people who sell themselves short. He uses people like Gideon who have avoidant tendencies. He uses people like Samson who have narcissistic tendencies. God is stronger than our weaknesses, and He invites us to allow Him to be at work in us as we live out this thing called the good news. Here's the good news of the gospel. None of those weaknesses define who you are. None of those weaknesses are your identity. God is calling us out of those weaknesses to be conformed to the image of His Son, and the Holy Spirit whispers to us, live like it's true. Live like it's true that God is conforming you to the image of His Son, that He has made you a new creation in Christ, that you are His child, that you have been born again, that He is doing something in you. Live like that is true. The story of Samson really is the story of the entire book of Judges. We saw this last week. There's this cycle, right? There's this cycle in which God's people forget Him. He calls them to worship Him, to be holy, to be set apart, to live for Him with all that they are, to be a unique nation, and then they forget Him. They begin worshiping other gods. So God allows them to suffer the consequences of that. And so they reject God's blessing, and foreign armies begin to oppress them. So that eventually they cry out to God, and God says, I'm going to rescue you now. And He sends a judge, and that judge comes to rescue them. A judge is a rescuer. He's a leader who leads God's people to deliverance, and God rescues His people through that process of deliverance. And at the end of that story, people usually, almost always in the book of Judges, you find that people then again forget God after a period of time. That's what happened in Samson's life. You saw that his mom was told that she's going to have a son, even though she's barren. She's going to have a son, and that she's to set him apart, to make him a Nazirite, as it were. The word Nazirite is found in the book of Numbers. Can you help me out there, Ethan? Awesome. You do a great job. Thank you. So a Nazirite is someone who is set apart and devoted to God. In fact, I didn't really make this connection for a long time. I thought that maybe a Nazirite had something to do with somebody who's from like the area of Nazareth. It's not that at all. A Nazirite comes from the Hebrew word Nazar, which means to separate. And it is a vow that someone makes to God to say, I have devoted myself to you. For this time of this season in my life, I am devoted to you. And sometimes that vow is a permanent Nazirite vow. That's what we see in the life of Samson. And when somebody makes that vow, in Numbers chapter 6, God makes provision for that. He says, here's what it will look like. They're going to have no alcohol. Actually, they're not even to touch a grape or grape leaves or a grapevine in any capacity. They should stay away from a vineyard. No alcohol. He says they are also to eat no unclean food, which is actually something that everybody in the Old Testament is supposed to do, but they're supposed to be particularly careful about that. We see this rule that appears in Numbers chapter 6, but not in the call of Samson, in which they are to not touch dead things, which is very interesting. We'll talk about that. And then they're to have no haircuts. Samson's mother is given these rules. She goes home. She tells the father, a man came. He told me that we're going to have a child, and he is to obey these rules. He's to be a Nazirite. The father, Manoah, in his wisdom says, how are we going to do this? Can you find that man again so that he can tell us what it looks like to raise a child like this? The mom is out in the field one day, and the angel of the Lord then again appears to her. She runs to get her husband. He comes and he says, how do we know how to raise this child? It's obviously an important responsibility. What do we do? And the angel of the Lord simply repeats those same things. Everything that I told the mother to do, you were to do as you raise your child. Gentlemen, happy Father's Day. Oh, that we would have the wisdom to recognize the great responsibility that we have. And that we would raise our children to the glory of the Lord, not just by what people around us tell us is wise advice, but that we would seek the Lord with direction. That's what we know it does. He's told what to do, and so they raise the boy, and we read at the end of Judges chapter 13, that the Spirit of the Lord began to stir Samson. We see it again. It actually comes up 4 times in the life of Samson. It's a theme in the book of Judges, but it only comes up 7 times in the book of Judges. 4 of those times are in the life of Samson. The Spirit of God, the Spirit of the Lord, come upon him with power. And something happens when the Spirit of the Lord comes upon Samson. We read again there in the very beginning of the next chapter that Samson falls in love with a woman across the valley from his hometown in the town of Timnah. He finds a Philistine woman there, and the father is worried, and rightfully so. God has given people direction that they're to look for a wife. They're to find a wife from among his chosen people, because they're committed to the Lord. But Samson falls in love with this Philistine woman. The narrator in the book of Judges says that this was God's plan. We might interpret that to mean that God was going to use this to bring about his purpose for his people. Manoah is concerned. He says, Samson, do you really want to take a Philistine wife? Samson persists, and we begin to see this theme of his weakness play out in his life. He takes this woman as his wife, And he and his parents are on their way to town. And as they're on their way to town, Samson leaves his parents, leaves the path, and when he's off the path, God begins to reveal to Samson this unique gift that he has. A lion comes roaring and charges at Samson. We read the Bible says, very graphic, but there's a lot of good description here in the book of Judges, a lot of very graphic description. He tore the lion apart with his hands. He had no weapon, and he tore it apart like you would tear apart a young goat. I don't know what that means. It's kind of gruesome. He tore it apart. Later we read that when they were going back for the wedding, Samson wanted to go check out the lion. As they went through the valley on the way to Timnah, he went to go check it out. And the lion had been probably, scholars say, mummified, so that it was dead, but not rotted. And there were bees living in the carcass of this lion who had formed a beehive, and there was honey in that hive. Samson went to the lion and took some of the honey out of the lion's carcass, ate it, and gave it to his parents. He didn't tell them where the honey came from. Scholars are divided over whether or not that's a problem. Did Samson violate the Nazirite vow? Was it a sin for him to touch a dead lion, or is the command in Numbers chapter 6 only a reference to dead human bodies, not just dead animal bodies? It doesn't matter. Lions are unclean food, and if a Nazirite comes into contact even with something unclean, he is unclean. And I would just say, yeah, the only reason this story is included in the book of Judges is to reveal to us something about Samson's character. He is not as concerned with the Nazirite vow as his parents seem to be. And that's the reason he doesn't tell them. I think that's the reason. So they make their way to the wedding, to the feast. Samson is given 30 groomsmen who are to not only attend him, but also protect the wedding from any kind of bad things that might happen during a feast. And Samson then begins to reveal another flaw in his character, his overconfidence. He's witty. He is very clever. He's cunning. And he offers a riddle to his 30 groomsmen. He says, out of the eater comes something to eat, out of the strong comes something sweet. That's the riddle. Which seems like a terrible riddle to me, but in the ancient world, apparently that's a genius riddle, and no one can figure it out. Samson says, if you can figure out the riddle, I will give you a pair of clothes, a set of clothes each, 30 sets of clothes. If you can't figure out the riddle, you owe me 30 sets of clothes. They can't figure it out. They go to Samson's wife, the woman to which he's engaged. Judges calls her his wife. God was consistent in that, by the way. And they say, if you don't tell us the answer to the riddle, we're going to burn you alive with your father and his household. She finally convinces Samson. She nags him. She finally convinces him, don't you love me? Tell me the answer to the riddle. He tells her. She then betrays his confidence, tells the 30 groomsmen about the riddle. They then come back to Samson and they say, what is sweeter than honey? What's stronger than a lion? Samson's upset. He's enraged. And so he goes to a nearby village, kills 30 people. 30 people. He kills them, takes their clothes, and brings those clothes back to the groomsmen and leaves angry. We're starting to see some flaws in Samson's character. Not only his overconfidence, not only his eventually apparent weakness for women, not only his anger, but he doesn't seem to be concerned with what is right. And that theme continues to play out. He goes home, he goes to his father's household, and then he realizes what a terrible thing he's done. He wants to go back and marry this woman. He goes back and finds out that she's been given to another man to be married. He wants to take her home. Her father says, you can't do that. She's already married. Are you interested in her younger sister? Samson's enraged again, and so he goes out into a field, finds 300 foxes somehow, captures them. It's an interesting detail. Ties their tails together, puts a torch on their tails, and sends them out to a field that is ready for harvest. If you trace the details out, this story becomes clear that Samson is not only about to do some damage, he's about to take their livelihood. And so the field is destroyed. The field and olive groves and grapevines and all of the livelihood of these Philistine people. Samson goes home and he lives in a Samson leaves and he goes and lives in a cave. He doesn't go back home. And I think that's significant. We'll continue to see that, why that's significant, as we finish up this story. He's living in a cave, and the Philistines want to take revenge. They said it's our right to take revenge. He's taking revenge on us. We're going to take revenge on him. And the cycle just continues over and over again. The Philistines come to the people of Judah and they say, bring us Samson. We need to deal with him. People of Judah are afraid. The Philistines in the story are obviously bullies. And so the men come to the cave. They lead the Philistines to the cave. And they say to Samson, they don't lead them into the cave. They go to the cave to get Samson. And they say to Samson, come out. We have to deliver you to the Philistines. He says, I'm only going to go if you don't kill me. They agree. I'm not going to kill you. We're not going to kill you. So they tie him up with 2 fresh ropes, indicating that they are strong ropes. And they bring Samson to the Philistines. As the Philistines begin to approach Samson, the Bible again, in the book of Judges, uses very scripted language to say that he just popped those ropes by flexing his muscles, and they became like charred flaps on his arms. They fell off, the ropes on his arms melted to the ground, and he killed the Philistines, inflicted severe damage. As we continue to read the life of Samson, we are beginning to discover that with his strengths come some weaknesses. Let me just trace this out with me. If we were to do a SWOT analysis of Samson, his strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, put that on the screen for us, Ethan. We might say that in the strength column are that he is strong, that he is cunning, that he is generous, and that he shares company with his parents. In the weakness column, we find a lot of things. That he ignores his father's advice, that he's prone to revenge, he has narcissistic tendencies, he is self-righteous, he has a weakness for women, and he's often overconfident. Samson's life reminds us of the threefold promise of God that we find repeated throughout Scripture. In Proverbs chapter 3, verse 34, it's repeated in the book of James, chapter 4, verse 6, and in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 5. God is opposed to the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. God is opposed to the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. And we see that played out in Samson's story. That God is clearly at work in Samson's life, but it is a mess. Everything that happens in his wake becomes a mess. Here's the problem with pride. Pride convinces us that we are good enough on our own without God. And so no matter how much grace God offers to us, no matter how much goodness he wants to bring into our life, we don't receive it from him because we believe we're good enough on our own. The Bible says then that God is opposed to the proud. Not that he doesn't want to do good things in our life, but that we aren't going to let him. Humility, on the other hand, is the acknowledgement of just how desperately we need him. It is an acknowledgement of who we are in comparison to him. It is an acknowledgement of who we are in his presence. It is an acknowledgement that we are not as big as we sometimes think that we are. God desires us to live a life of humility so that we might receive his grace and his goodness and allow him to work through us. And I would say what happens in this story can happen to all of us, that our strengths can become our weaknesses. Our strengths can become our weaknesses, and vice versa, our weaknesses can become our strengths when we recognize that promise in Scripture. That God is opposed to the proud and gives grace to them. When we operate out of pride, our strengths become our weaknesses. When we operate out of humility, our weaknesses can become our strengths. It's a very natural process. I think in spite of the fact that we know the importance of humility, we begin to believe that our strengths are what's going to save us. People tell us how good we are in those things that we do well. We begin to believe that who we are is that we are intelligent. Or who we are is that we get things done. Or even that who we are is that we are someone who is compassionate. Or that we're someone who's artistic. Or athletic. Or that we're good students. Or that we're good bosses or managers. Or that we're we're the researcher who pays attention to the details, that we have these organizational skills, or that we're good at teaching, or that we are servant-hearted, or that we speak the truth, or whatever it is, those things become our identity. We think that those are the things that really matter to people and matter to God. And all the while, He's inviting us just to live in humility. When we live in humility, those strengths can really be strengths. God can not only use them for His purpose, but we get to allow Him to be a part of what we're doing, and it is much less messy. When we respond in pride, we begin to think that those strengths are going to save us, and they eventually highlight our weaknesses. Pride limits our experience of grace, so that no matter how much we are given, we fail to receive it. Humility opens us and invites God to accomplish His purpose through us. Psychologists, not just psychologists, but people who study culture, have been saying for the last 2 decades that there is a rise of narcissism, not just in the United States, but across the world. In fact, they refer to it now as an epidemic. In 1963, psychologists developed an apparatus, a tool called the Narcissistic Personality Inventory. They've been offering that inventory to college students who are in their freshman year since 1963. In 1963, the people who scored over a 21 on that narcissistic personality inventory made up about 12% of the student population. By 1980, it had risen 30%, and today, most people would say it's somewhere between 70 and 80%. And people try to get a handle on why that is. Social media is always to blame at this point. There's a discussion often about the self-esteem movement. Whatever the case may be, it's very clear that we have lost as a culture the value of humility. We have lost a willingness and a desire to acknowledge that quiet strength is more valuable than drawing attention to ourselves. That celebrating others is what God is inviting us to, not inviting others to celebrate us. If as a church we're somehow able to recover that biblical virtue of humility, I believe that the church would stand out as a bright beacon in the world. Where we operate not out of a self-confidence, but out of a biblical kind of confidence. And people who are learning to do that walk with peace and joy and hope. They are redemptive. They are not waiting for other people to validate them. They find their validation in their relationship with Christ alone. That is not only an uncommon thing in our society, it is a new thing. What if we were able to live out the truth of that verse? Not that God is opposed to the proud, but that He gives grace upon grace upon grace. Every strength can easily become a weakness when we operate out of pride. Every weakness can easily become a strength when we operate out of humility, independence. In chapter 15, verse 9, we find Samson in a cave. He's living in a cave. He doesn't go home. He can't live among the Philistines. He's living in a cave, and he feels the weight of his shame. In some ways, he is the prodigal son. Hear this. Shame always nurtures our pride. And that pride then facilitates our weakness. Shame appeals to our pride and says that you can't allow or afford for people to know your weakness. And shame then is the devil's greatest tool. It's always been true. It's true in the book of Genesis. The man and woman, they disobey God, and what do? They cover themselves in their shame. They don't want their weakness to be exposed, and God is inviting us to allow Him to speak the truth of His word to our weakness. But shame always compels us to withdraw. It tells us we can't go home. It tells us we can't be known. It tells us we can't belong because when you belong, people know the real you. And when they know the real you, they might see your weakness. And so in our pride, we withdraw, we resist being going. I think that's part of what's happening here in Samson's life. He's willing to show off his strength. It's not like he's ashamed in that he's not willing to be among people. He's willing to show off his strength. He's not unwilling to be in a place of vulnerability where people really know him. He's living in a cave. The beautiful good news of the gospel is that God has overcome our shame. That no matter how much you fail, no matter what weaknesses you continue to live out, no matter how strong people say you are, when you know the real truth behind the scenes, that you are sometimes depressed and anxious and worried, and that problems seem to get the best of you. No matter what you feel behind closed doors, the beautiful truth of the gospel is that God speaks the truth to us and says, you are not the sum total of your shortcomings and your failures or even your successes and your wins. You are who I say you are. Live like it's true. We see in Samson the Spirit of the Lord not only stir in him, but fall upon him at times. Can I tell you the truth of who you are? If you belong to Jesus, the Spirit of God doesn't come and go with your failure or your success. Romans 8 says that if anyone does not have the Spirit of Christ, he doesn't belong to Christ. The thing goes on to say that that Spirit of Christ is the Spirit of God. It is the Holy Spirit. It is at work in you. And it's at work in me. And if by that Spirit we overcome the misdeeds of the body, we will have life. And it's that same Spirit that imparts gifts to us so that we can live a different kind of life. So that in all of our success is really about what God is doing through us. It's never about what we're accomplishing. It's 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10, that if anyone serves, he's to serve with the strength that God provides. That kind of strength. Not in our own strength. Even it says that when we speak to one another, we should speak as though we are speaking the very words of God. He is speaking through us to accomplish His purpose. The truth of the gospel is that God is at work in your life, not on the basis of whether or not you were successful or you weren't. But He is at work in your life to the degree that you're willing to humble yourself. Continue to read Samson's story, read that he goes to Gaza. Again, he can't go home. He goes to Gaza, which is about 45 miles away. It's pretty far. It's on the Mediterranean Sea. It's about as far as he can go to the west. And he goes there, and when he gets there, he finds a prostitute. And he goes, and the Bible describes in a metaphor, in the usual way that it does, that he slept with her. The Philistines realize they have him trapped. The city gates are closed, and they're going to kill him in the morning. But Samson wakes up in the middle of the night, and he leaves, and he goes to the gates, and he pulls them off the hinges along with the bar that holds the door in place, and he climbs up a hill, sets them on top of the hill, and leaves. Samson comes back to the valley where he's from, and he falls in love, with a woman named Delilah. And she is invited by the Philistines, by Samson's enemies, to discover the secret of his strength. They offer her a very handsome reward. 11,000 shekels each. The leaders of the Philistines come to Delilah and offer her 11,000 shekels each. 1,100 shekels is roughly the equivalent of all the money you will make in your life. And there are multiple people who want to give that to her if she will discover the source of Samson's strength. And so you know how the story goes. She bats her eyelashes at Samson and says, "Tell me the secret of your strength." He first says, "If you tie me up with 7 bowstrings, then I won't be able to get out." That's the secret. She invites the Philistines into her home. She puts Samson to sleep near her lap. She ties him with 7 bowstrings. She says, "Samson, wake up, the Philistines are upon you." He wakes up, and we read that those bowstrings are like charred flax on his arms. He breaks them, shakes them free. Delilah's upset. "You've lied to me. Don't you even love me? You won't tell me the secret of your strength?" He doesn't know, of course, that the Philistines are in the room. She she's just not going to give up, and she is insistent that he doesn't love her. And so maybe we begin to see another weakness. You can't disappoint people. You can't disappoint women. Through the series of 2 other tests, it becomes clear that Samson is holding this secret. And when she finally says to him, Samson, tell me the secret of your strength, he just can't resist anymore. And he says, if you shave my head, I'll become weak. If you cut my hair, I'll become weak. And so she puts him to sleep on her lap. And while he's sleeping, someone comes and cuts off his 7 rings. And when he wakes, the book of Judges says that he assumed that he would get up and shake himself free like he had done with the strength of life. The Philistines came, grippers who would gouge out his eyes. They brought him as their prisoner. They held a great feast to their god Dagon, and as a celebration at this feast, they made Samson do feats of strength. They made a mockery of him. The Bible, the phrase that the Bible uses is something like that, that they invited him to be a jester, an entertainer of some kind. They made a mockery of him. We read that Samson's hair began to grow back, and that as it did so, he cried out to God. He said, God, just work for me one more. And it's only in that moment at the end of Samson's life that you see anything that looks vaguely like humility. In my weakness, at this moment right now, gives me one lesson. And here's the moral, I think, of Samson's life. If God is gracious to us, if God cares about us, if God desires to work in our lives, if He is using the process of our engagement in the world around us and His invitation to be used by Him, if He is gracious to us, we will either humble ourselves or be humbled by Him. He desires to bring us to a place where we acknowledge that life is not found anywhere else other than in a relationship with Him in which we receive from Him what He has to give, and we offer that same thing to others as we receive Him. Humble yourself or be humbled. And here Samson has been humbled and comes to a place where he's able to humble himself. And what we see at the end of Samson's life, what we see through the story, is that not only is God stronger than our weakness, He also overcomes our shame. He invites us to a place of humility to say, who you thought you were is not who you are. You are my child. You've been given a spirit of power and love and self-discipline. You are a new creation. You have my spirit in you. You belong to a family, a great big family that derives its name from Jesus Christ the King. You're not lost or abandoned because Jesus never leaves you or forsakes you. You have overcome. And all these things that He speaks to us in His Word, we are being invited to live them out as though they are true. We are being invited to not only believe them, but to live our lives in such a way that we act in a way that is consistent with what God says is true about who we are as people who have put our faith in Jesus. I would say this is what Jesus means when He comes preaching the good news of the kingdom. That there is a new reality at work. And that as we enter into this kingdom, things work there differently than they do in the kingdom of the world. That in this thing called the kingdom of God, the weak become strong. And that's what we see in Samson's story. So how do we do that? How do we live out this promise that God's employs the proud and gives grace to the humble? How do we maintain humility? There's just 3 things real quick before we go. First of all, we read that Scripture is a mirror, that God's Word is like a mirror, and that when we read it, it reveals something about who we really are. It reveals something about what God says is true. And so, if we're going to maintain humility, it's going to require that we spend time with Him. It also means that we're going to spend time in gospel-centered community. And I don't just mean the church, where we show up for church. I mean that we get together with people in small groups or in Bible studies or whatever it is, and we, in our IDRs, as we call them here at Safe Harbor, and we get to know one another in such a way that we're not afraid or ashamed to have our weaknesses, or to have our weaknesses be exposed. That we trust one another. And in the context of that community, we speak the truth of who God says that we are. And the last idea is we serve one another. It means that we go out of our way to allow God to work through us. And we submit to others by placing ourselves under them in service to them. And that's why in the book of Philippians, the Apostle Paul says that each of you should have the same attitude of that of Christ Jesus. That we should do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than ourselves. And when we learn to do that, when we serve others, we begin to realize that my strengths are not all that great, my weaknesses are not all that important. What matters is that God's over for me. So here's a couple questions for us to consider as we wrap up today. I think the first question might be, how has shame kept me from living out this calling that God's given me? How has my embarrassment over my weaknesses kept me from coming out in the light and just saying, God, use me as I am? We might also ask, how does God invite me to allow Him to use the strengths that He's given me to accomplish His purpose in this world? And then lastly, I think we might ask, what will it look like to receive grace and humility this week? What's the thing I need to do? Do I need to spend more time in His Word? Do I need to engage in gospel-centered community with people who really know me? And when it gets a little scary that they might know my weaknesses, rather than backing away, I just press them closer to people who understand the gospel. Maybe it means that we serve. We served others this week at Serving Hope in Goldsboro this weekend, or this past Wednesday. It was a good time. Man, a great turnout from Safe Harbor in Goldsboro, serving food there. Serving Hope is a nonprofit, is part of a nonprofit ministry started by Angeline, who is with her father, visiting her brother today, her sister, I should say, and brother-in-law today, for Father's Day. Angeline Winter is our secretary here at Safe Harbor. She started a nonprofit called One Hope, and one of the things that we do along with her is that we go downtown and we serve food for others. And we had a great time. We met some good people. One of the people that I met there was someone who has a connection here at Safe Harbor. His name is Kerry Wiggins. He's the former high school football coach at Signal High School. His son is a quarterback playing at FIU. He has a very close relationship with some of the young men who have attended Safe Harbor, come through here and gone on to play at college. Tony Tigginoff, he and his wife raised 4 boys, and have invited a lot of those young men into his home. One of those young men is Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis is a starting receiver, plays for UCF. We were really excited to see him play this year, and I would say to you that he is more than anything, more than being an amazing athlete, he has great character and humility. I was talking to Kerry about that. He says, I was telling him my observation, he says, everything you see is true. It's the genuine thing, it's the real deal. Gabe was raised by his mother. He doesn't know his father. His mother is also in her own right. But what I find encouraging is that in spite of that perceived weakness, there have been people that God has brought into his life to nurture something beyond sportsmanship, to nurture something more than just humility and composure, to tell them the truth, who God says that he is. Kerry, by the way, Coach Kerry Wiggins, is a preacher. We had a great discussion about the gospel this past week. He's told me about a family of young men who he has seen come and go over the years. And the reason that he invests in them is that he has seen what happens when people become overconfident. When they begin to believe their own best. Pride doesn't before the fall. What would it look like for us to be a church that lives out this truth, God is opposed to proud, but He gives grace to the humble? What if in a culture of narcissism, in a culture that continues to be increasingly obsessed with self-image, we simply said, we just want to live out what God says is true for us. We're not trying to prove something. We just want to live out what God says.